Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Excellencies, Heads of Delegation, ladies and gentlemen, I'm highly delighted to address on behalf of the Mozambican people and on my own behalf the international community in this general debate which takes place at a so historic and symbolic time of the celebration of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. For the Republic of Mozambique, this celebration coincides with the 45th anniversary of the acceptance and therefore accession of our country as a legitimate and fully fledged member of this organization, which gives us our honorable place in the international community. I would like to recognize His Excellency Ambassador Tijani Muhammad Bande, President of the 74th session of the General Assembly, for his performance, and I congratulate you, Mr. Volkan Bozkır, President of this session of the General Assembly, and I express my country's willingness to work together for the success of your tenure. I warmly congratulate Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, for his tireless commitment to upholding the ideals enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations by placing the United Nations in the lead of collective efforts to overcome contemporary challenges, including its initiatives aimed at addressing the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. President, Excellencies, today's world is markedly different from the one that existed when the United Nations was founded. There have been significant improvements in our collective well-being. Social and human development indicators have improved substantially. Life expectancy increased, mortality and morbidity reduced. The number of member states almost quadrupled, from 51 to 193 countries, including Mozambique. Efforts to empower women are now a deepening reality. The theme of the inclusive development, taking the 2030 agenda as their banner. Mozambique therefore upholds the assumptions of common but differentiated responsibility as well as international agreed development goals in the light of the Paris Declaration on the Effectiveness of Development Aid. All this shows that multilateral cooperation remains the best approach to addressing the challenges and mitigating the suffering of the people who are the main reason for the creation of the United Nations. Multilateralism within the United Nations is also key if we take into account that the world economy, especially that of developing countries, has been severely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And its restoration requires global, integrated, and concerted interventions. Nationalism and isolationism in the face of a pandemic are, as far as we are concerned, a prescription for failure to respond to this and other infectious diseases of an unpredictable nature. Other global phenomena and challenges calling for the United Nations-led multilateral intervention include terrorism, climate change, cybersecurity, public health, research and development, trade and industrialization. In the global village in which we live, national and international issues are increasingly less discernible. The transnational nature and Interconnection of these phenomena require leadership that recognizes that in today's world, our intervention must take into account the intrinsic relationship between the national, regional, and global citizens. Mr. President, Excellencies, Mozambique welcomes and reiterates its support for the actions of the Secretary General aimed at reforming the United Nations in the areas of peace and security, peace operations, development, and management of the organization. Nevertheless, we are concerned about a lack of progress in the intergovernmental negotiations so that the reform of the Security Council will yield results in line with the 21st century. The reform has the merit of placing international peace, security, and stability as catalysts for the global development agenda, as well as making the UN more representative, efficient, and transparent based on the contemporary geopolitical situation, which will render the decisions. Mr. President, Excellencies, the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals are instruments that fuel the hope of billions of people around the world in achieving the long-awaited progress and well-being of all peoples. In this context, Mozambique submitted in July 2020 its first voluntary national report on the Sustainable Development Goals, which shares achievements based on the aspirations of the Mozambican people in compliance with this international instrument reflected in our 5-year government program 2020-2024. The future we want lies in the actions of the present. The United Nations we need depend on our posture and responsible action today and tomorrow. Only with a collective approach and humanism, we will successfully implement the agenda of inclusiveness that we have chosen to leaving no one behind. It is in this context that the government of Mozambique promotes peace building, the preservation of human rights, social justice, gender equality and equity, the inclusion of young people and people with disabilities in development programs, cementing unity and sharing of benefits, which is a salient feature of our governance. With regard to climate change, due to its geographical location, Mozambique has been cyclically affected by extreme events. Every year, the country has suffered cyclones, floods, and droughts, and memories of cyclones Idai and Kenneth are still fresh. More than 1 year later, we continue efforts to rebuild and recover socioeconomic damage combined with adaptation and resilience measures in the light of internationally accepted practices under the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, to which we have been a party since June 2018. We take this opportunity to reiterate our gratitude to the international community for the support provided during and after the cyclones. Mozambique continues to promote sustainable management of biodiversity and ecosystems and natural resources with the purpose of adding value to the integrated local development of communities. In this regard, the promotion of conservation areas in the national territory continues to deserve our special attention. On the other hand, we have sought to expand access to electricity for domestic and industrial. At present, all 154 district headquarters are connected to the national power grid, and the electrification program for administrative posts is underway. Recognizing the role of agriculture to this end, the government decided to allocate 10% of its annual budget to this sector for the first time, in line with the Maputo Declaration on Agriculture and Food Security adopted by the African Union in 2003. It is in this regard that we launched the Integrated Management Program for Agriculture and Natural Resources, SUSTENTA, which promotes the socio-economic integration of the Mozambican population. Mr. President, the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, officially announced by the World Health Organization in December 2019, took the world by surprise. It is a health scourge with a high degree of spread and lethality, with greater severity in developing countries, particularly in Africa. COVID-19 has transformed the dynamics of trade, professional and social relations among human beings in all spheres of life, both in urban and rural environments. This scenario requires the mobilization of additional financial resources to compensate for the economic slowdown, given that the scourge of the pandemic still prevails around the world and in our country in particular. While response measures to COVID-19 continue, we take this opportunity to thank bilateral and multilateral partners of the international community for the multiple support that has enabled us to prevent and contain the spread of the new coronavirus and embark on what we call the new normal. Excellencies, the massive efforts we have been making in the framework of peace and security consolidation, as well as in the implementation of the socio-economic development program aligned with the 2030 agenda, have been put to test by terrorist acts and criminals in some districts of Cabo Delgado province, and by armed actions by allegedly dissident Renamo groups in some parts of Manica and Sofala provinces in the central region. Terrorists heinously kill people, cause displaced people, destroy housing and social economic infrastructures, plunder community property, and keep children and women in captivity. As a consequence of these phenomena, more than 1,000 people have been killed and some 250,000 people are internally displaced. The government has mobilized humanitarian assistance for the internally displaced people and promotes socio-economic development activities for the communities. It was under these efforts that we recently launched and operationalized the northern region integrated development agency at DIN, with the aim of promoting multi-sectoral actions with a view to the integrated socio-economic development of the provinces of Nyasa, Cabo Delgado and Nampula, aware that the terrorist actions of which the country is a victim have links with international groups that are also involved in transnational organized crime. We have sought to address these phenomena in cooperation with other countries and regional and international organizations. In this context, we welcome all initiatives and partnerships that will go a long way in complementing our ongoing efforts to curtail the harmful actions of terrorists in our country. As part of the implementation of the Peace and Reconciliation Agreement between the government and Renamo, we are implementing decentralization and disarmament, demobilization and reintegration, DDR, a process of Renamo's remnant armed elements that has already covered about 1,000 ex-combatants. We would like to take this opportunity to express our gratitude for the role of the United Nations and the international community, particularly the dynamism of the Secretary General Personal Envoy. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude our remarks, we reaffirm our firm belief that international security and peace making and maintenance, the preservation and respect for human rights, and the promotion of sustainable development only find fertile ground to flourish in the common approach and collective action of all stakeholders in the world. We have said so with great humility and willingness to save our people and to contribute to the prosperity of humanity. We want with actions to contribute to the future we want, to shape the United Nations we need, and therefore renew our commitment to multilateralism and valuing the most precious commodity of the universe, life and quality life. Let us therefore revisit our global commitment to the consolidation of the principles of the Charter of the United Nations, keeping in mind the main recipients of these efforts, namely we, the peoples. Happy celebration to the United Nations, and thank you very much.